Let's talk about type 9. Another body type, but very, very different from type 8. In type 8, for them, sex is very straightforward. They're not beating around the bush. Type 9 is quite different actually, and sometimes it's very difficult to read them. And as a matter of fact, 9s often have a very hard time reading themselves. At first sight, you may think that 9s are the perfect partner because they go with the flow, they're attuned to the needs and desires of the partner, they're not overly asserting their own things, they're very agreeable and they hardly refuse anything. But this goes hand in hand with a certain sense of absent-mindedness. Sometimes it may seem as if they don't really like sex, as if they don't have a real libido, as if they're not really into the partner, or as if they don't really like what the partner is doing to try to please them. Quite often 9s may just be doing trivial tasks in the house while their partner is waiting for them in the bedroom, and this may give the incorrect perception that they're just looking for excuses for not having sex. Now the point is that 9s are a withdrawn type and they really need to be drawn into the bedroom by their partner in a very direct way, because quite often they just do not get subtle hints or cues. Basically because they're often daydreaming. Now, Angad wrote that having sex with a 9 may sometimes feel as if you're having sex with an inanimate object. Of course, Angad was caricaturizing and maybe exaggerating a little bit, but the core is really true, because 9s may be very much into their body, but it's as if their mind is often somewhere else. And of course, this very much applies to the lower levels, but even on the higher levels, something about this paradigm still remains. Now, on the basis of what I said, you may now start thinking that 9s may have a passive or boring sex life, but that is actually very far from the truth, because quite often 9s may come across as quite conservative, but in reality they may actually have an extremely active sex life. Type 9 is a body type, so sex is very physical for them. And 9s can be very sensual. They may like a massage, they like cuddling, they really like the physical sensation of body contact, they like being touched in the right place. Many 9s actually believe that a world without body contact would not be truly human. And so very often they may like cuddling as much as sex itself. Now, 9s somehow believe that it is possible to establish contact between two souls through physical means. And 9s actually seek to merge with their partner. So it's very important to understand that sex is not only physical, because very often they first need to have an emotional connection first before they're able to get physical with each other. So sex for the sake of sex, or sex just for physiological release, is actually not a thing for 9s, even not for the self-preservation 9. Now, when you ask 9s why they have sex, you will often hear about connection. And connection is something that comes up with all types, and I discussed this in more detail already in lesson 2. But so what does connection mean for type 9? Well, in the upper ranges, 9s can be really present, and they may not only have this physical but also a mental and emotional contact with their partner. However, in the lower ranges, 9s may use sex as a tool for self-narcotization, a way of self-forgetting, a way of trying to get into some kind of blissful state of eternal love, something like going back into the uterus of the mother. Basically, their paradisiac soul wants to feel connected with the universe. 9s want to lose themselves and disappear in the partner, and this is especially true for the sexual 9, because remember, self-preservation 9 wants to merge with their body and comfort, the social 9 wants to merge with the group, and the sexual 9 wants to merge with the partner. But basically what they are doing in the lower and average ranges is the opposite of a true connection. It's the opposite of being present. They think they are interacting with a partner, but in reality, they're not at all. So 9s may lose themselves in the physicality of sex, but mentally and emotionally, they may be entirely absent. They may be distracted and just be somewhere mentally in their inner sanctum, and they may be living in some kind of fantasy world where everything is harmonious and pleasant. But this absence can actually be pretty draining for the partner, and it can actually kill the sexual arousal and buildup of the partner. When we are describing type 9, the word inertia comes up very often. And inertia also characterizes the behavior of type 9 in the bedroom. Now, inertia does not mean that they are lazy, it just means they're going with the flow. Inertia means that in an inactive state, the type 9 is going to stay inactive, and in an active state, they remain active. So, what does this inertia or going with the flow mean in terms of sex? Well, first of all, 9s are not assertive. They have more of a yielding, accommodating, accepting and mellow energy. And in practice, this means that they're quite unlikely to assert their needs or to initiate sex. Sex just happens to them. 9s are quite uncomfortable with initiating sex. And this is not because they have low sexual desire. No, they're feeling uncomfortable initiating. They're basically afraid of being dismissed or rejected. They don't want to end up in an awkward situation where they try to initiate something and it turns out badly. So type 9 is only going to initiate when they know that things will be okay, and they will do so from a very loving place and not in a direct manner. So for example, they're going to use a lot of physical touch or using signs of affections, and gradually they will move to sex. Or a female 9 may put on some sexy underwear and hope that the partner is going to notice these hints. So in general, type 9 is unlikely to take the lead, but when the partner has started the process, they can become quite active. And as I already said, 9s tend not to assert their needs and do not really pursue their own desires. Basically, they may feel that it's not the right moment to ask for something, or they don't want to upset their partner who maybe doesn't like what the 9 would like. Or type 9 may think that, well, maybe next time I'll ask for it, but then the next time never happens. And of course, levels of development play an important role to the extent that a 9 is going to assert his or her own needs. But the problem is actually further aggravated by the fact that type 9 often does not know what they want themselves. They're not really attuned with their own needs and desires. They need some time to process it, and they cannot really verbalize it in the moment. So as a result, they may believe that their own wishes are not that important. Now, of course, not being attuned to your own needs and desires may make it more difficult to have an orgasm or to have a really satisfying sexual experience. But this also has an impact on the partner, because for the partner it can be very difficult to know what is really going on in this self-narcotized 9, and pulling out the thoughts and wishes out of the mouth of the 9 is not really erotic, it's not really arousing. Now, that doesn't mean that the 9 doesn't know what they want or what they like. On the contrary, 9s can actually have very vivid imaginations, but it's just that it's very difficult to put their words into thoughts and to convey it in the moment to their partner. So instead of focusing on their own needs and desires, they just go with the flow and they focus on the needs of the partner. 9s can be real pleasers, and they care very much about the sexual satisfaction of their partner. They may not know what their own likes and dislikes are, but they're very much attuned to the likes and dislikes of the partner. They have a high sensitivity and they're very attentive to what the partner wants or doesn't want, and in general they're fine with everything, because 9s tend to be very understanding and non-judgmental, and hardly anything is going to be a taboo for type 9. Now, similarly to type 2, Nines get some kind of pleasure from pleasing their partner, and they may find it equally difficult to relax when all the attention and all the action is focused on them. Now, when type 9 gets a response or notices somehow, even very subtle, that something was disliked or that a certain behavior overwhelmed the partner, then the 9 is not going to go there anymore. But instead, the 9 is going to try to pay extra attention to what the partner really likes. Now, that being said, most 9s will actually avoid engaging in any behavior they do not like. Instead, they're just going to avoid passively. And maybe one last word about the needs of type 9. As a 9 is often merging with their partner, they may come to believe that the needs of the partner are actually their own needs. The second manifestation of inertia relates to adaptability. Now, there is some kind of false stereotype about type 9 that might make one believe that 9s are boring or passive in bed. But this is most often not the case. Instead, inertia relates more to the adaptability and flexibility during the sexual act. Now, 9s are very responsive lovers, and they very well feel the sexual cues of the partner, and they try to match the partner with their own sexual intensity and energy. And this blending of intensity and energy creates some kind of sense of harmony, and this is really what type 9 is seeking. So 9s can be very vanilla with a vanilla partner, or they can become very submissive with a partner who's very dominant and active. Or with an assertive partner, the 9, it may also awaken their own sexual energy. Of course, they don't want to have too much intensity because that would take them out of their comfort zone, but they're willing to submit if the partner wants it. Now, on the contrary, with an undemanding and a passive partner, the 9 may actually start corresponding to this caricature of being inactive, languid and boring, and just being happy with the routine. And of course, with a more explorative partner, type 9 may actually be up to just try anything, and this is going to make the explorative partner very happy. And again, the 9 is happy to adapt to the type structure of the partner. So for example, with an 8, the 9 is very happy to go into a submissive role. Or with a 6, the 9 will be happy to do the turn taking, which is very much what the 6 is looking for. Although quite some 9s are sexually quite conservative, they are very accepting and non-judgmental about the likes and dislikes of their partner. And this inertia they have makes them very open to try out new things, as long as you don't ask them too directly if they want something or not. This inertia also makes them open to exploring some kind of kinks, as long as it's not too much off, and as long as it does not involve any painful sensations. Now, it's important to understand that going with the flow is not the same as surrendering. Surrendering requires presence in the sexual act. Surrendering is very much a very active and a very conscious thing. But going with the flow is basically the opposite. It's not rooted in presence. It's all about self-forgetting and absent-mindedness. Now, the other interesting thing is that although 9s may often seem to be quite submissive, most often they are actually not. Because also here, submissiveness or true submissiveness actually includes or requires an intentional element. But also here, 9s are just going with the flow. They just let things happen. And actually, on the contrary, by nature, 9s are not really submissive. They're rather dominant quite often, but they're very afraid of showing it. 9s may be out of touch with their own wishes and desires, but once they know what they really want, they are going to get their way. And even if they are with a dominant partner, they are going to adapt in a certain way, but most likely they're still going to get what they wanted. Now, the last thing that I wanted to say about inertia and how sex happens relates to the first sexual experiences. There's quite a few nines who lost their virginity at a very young age. Basically, somebody was sexually attracted to them and they just somehow let it happen. They didn't really object. But also the opposite is true. In more conservative environments, many nines are actually latecomers. As they think and behave in a more conservative and innocent way, other people may get the impression that the nine is not really interested in sex, so they're not making a first move. However, I can actually say that I know quite a few nines who became sexually active only in their late 20s or early 30s, but they really made up for all the lost time very, very quickly. Of course, this inertia may often be very nice and pleasant to the partner of the nine, but it can often lead to very bad consequences for the nine, him or herself, because nines may often endure a lot, but it doesn't mean that they really like it. And very often nines may end up in sexual situations they rather had not, just because they were afraid of saying no, they just went along, they did not want to be confrontational, they were unable to set clear boundaries when their integrity was not respected. And as a result, you may often hear nines talking about situations they had rather not ended up in. Or they agreed to having sex whereas they actually didn't want to. They were not in the mood, or they did not want to have sex with a specific person. But they just feared the consequences of saying no. So quite often nines may end up in some kind of masochistic positions. Not because they like it, but just because they are unable to set clear boundaries. Now, and in even worse cases, unhealthy nines can easily become a target for sexual abuse. They can be an easy prey for manipulative types that are just abusing their naivety and their idealization of relationships. So quite often, unhealthy nines can easily end up in situations that are quite bad and dangerous. So, nines don't assert their needs and desires, and they often end up in situations they don't like. So that's it? I mean, that's it for the long term? No, of course not. I mean, nines have some kind of delayed emotional reaction. It takes them some time to really come to understand what they really want and what they don't want. And as a body type, they really want to be in control. They really want to get things their way. And they're not doing this in a direct manner like 8s and 1s do. They do this more in a hidden and indirect manner. And on top of that, 9s are withdrawing or withholding, hoping that a person is going to leave if the relationship is not working out, but they're not going to take the first active step themselves. So what happens when their sexual needs are not met? 9s are not just going to allow this to happen and lead an unsatisfactory sexual life in most cases. Very often they will be full of resentment towards their partner, and they will have some kind of naive ideas that their partner should actually know what the 9 really wants. They're going to be full of resentment, and they will complain internally, but they will not communicate this to their partner. They're not proactively doing anything to solve it. But inside they will have these thoughts of like, so when is it finally going to be my turn? And when can I be at the center of attention? Now, this perceived lack of attention from their partner can often serve to them as a justification for looking for having the needs met elsewhere. So you will find many 9s who will actually have an extramarital affair. And in their perception, it just happened. But in reality, they were actually looking subconsciously for having their needs met. Now, let's not forget that 9s can sometimes be quite secretive, and they are able to do things in hiding in such a way that nobody would ever expect it from them. And of course, this does not mean that 9s are more prone than other types to cheat or to go for extramarital affairs. It's just that they will do it in a more invisible manner. And of course, there's also 9s that are so much asleep to their own needs and that they're so passive that they're actually not doing any effort in order to get these needs met. Now, with regards to engaging or not engaging in unwanted sexual activities, Nines most often revert to passive aggression and avoidance when the resentment has invisibly grown too strong. Also here, most often, nines will blame their partner for pressuring them into things they don't want, but they're unlikely to blame themselves for not setting clear boundaries. Very often, nines are going to pretend that everything is fine in order to avoid conflict, but internally they will be silently angry. So, nines will look for ways for not having sex, but in such a way that they do not look guilty. So, as a matter of fact, withholding sex is a very common passive-aggressive strategy for a nine when they do not feel happy in their relationship. Sex is a connection thing, so they are going to refuse sex when they do not feel this emotional connection with their partner. And again, they will do so without telling honestly to their partner that they are angry. So instead, nines are going to feign sleep, they pretend they have a headache or low sexual desire, or they just refuse sex without giving an explanation for why. Or even worse, they may subconsciously develop some kind of sexual disorder, such as erectile or lubrication problems. And in some cases, this resentment may actually lead to a real loss of libido. So the inertia is common for all nines, but of course there are some differentiation among the subtypes. Let's start with the self-preservation nine, because this is probably the most passive and lazy nine of all. Basically, what worked last time is going to work now and is also going to work in the future. So they may be very comfortable with repetitiveness and routine in their sex life. They may actually have a very vivid imagination and they may fantasize in bed for hours, but very often they're not really going to do anything to put this imagination or fantasies into true action. They may really enjoy sex, but it often takes some time to really get started. And they may actually also do an effort quite often when they know that their partner really wants it. Now, the sexual nines are a little bit different, because for them, they're really seeking this merging with a partner. They're really seeking this physical, emotional, and a spiritual melting of their own soul with the soul of the partner. And they can often lose themselves entirely in a sexual or an erotic encounter. Now, sexual connection is even more important to them than for the two other subtypes. And the sexual nine can also show up with a little bit more passion and intensity, and they may also be more proactive in actually initiating sex or in being more explorative. And finally, the social nine may have more of a approach of eternal brotherly love towards everybody. It doesn't mean that they are necessarily promiscuous, but they may often be a little bit less picky of who they sexually engage with. And very interestingly, due to their very accepting and nurturing approach to life, there's quite some social nines who could easily imagine themselves being a surrogate partner, especially if the sexual instinct comes second. Now, what is a surrogate partner? A surrogate partner is very often used in sex therapy for a person who does not have a partner in order to do sexual exercises with. And this does not mean that the surrogate partner is only going to have sexual intercourse, but very often this involves exercises about how to deal with a naked body, how do you deal with touch, and only in the last stages can there also be some sexual intercourse.